In 1566, 20-year-old Danish nobleman Tycho Brahe lost part of his nose in a sword duel, fought in near-total darkness against his own third cousin over an argument about which of them was the better mathematician. For the rest of his life, he wore a custom-made metal nose, and in 2010, scientists who exhumed his skeleton confirmed exactly what it was made of. This is not an exaggerated legend passed down through footnotes. It is one of the best documented oddities in the history of science. The astronomer whose 2 decades of naked-eye observations later let Johannes Kepler prove the planets moved in ellipses spent his entire adult life with a metal face. Tycho Brahe was born in 1546 into Danish nobility, destined by family tradition for a career in law or the royal court. That plan ended in 1560, when he was 13. A partial solar eclipse occurred exactly when astronomers had calculated it would, and Tycho was stunned that the movements of the sky could be predicted with mathematics at all. He began secretly buying astronomical instruments and books while officially studying law at the University of Copenhagen, then Leipzig. By his early 20s, Tycho had a reputation as brilliant, arrogant, and quick to anger over intellectual disputes. In December 1566, at an engagement party thrown by a professor in Rostock, Germany, he got into an argument with Manderup Parsberg, a fellow Danish nobleman and his own third cousin. Accounts differ on the exact subject. Some say astrology, some say a mathematical formula. But both men were convinced the other was wrong, and neither would back down. Words escalated into a formal challenge. 2 days later, on December 29th, the 2 young noblemen agreed to settle it with rapiers. The duel was fought at 7 o'clock in the evening, in the dead of a Danish winter, meaning near total darkness, with no artificial light beyond what a nearby lantern could offer. Rapiers were not dueling foils. A solid hit could kill. Both men were reportedly drunk from the party they had just left, which made the swordplay clumsier and more dangerous, not less. Neither Tycho nor Parsberg could clearly see the other's blade in the dark. They lunged and parried blind, guided mostly by sound and instinct. At some point in the confused exchange, Parsberg's blade connected, not with Tycho's chest or arm, but across the bridge of his nose, slicing away a significant portion of it in a single stroke. Tycho went down bleeding heavily. The duel ended immediately. In an age before antiseptics, a deep facial wound like this carried real risk of fatal infection, and for days it was unclear whether the young nobleman would survive at all. He did. But the bridge of his nose was gone for good, replaced by an open wound that eventually scarred over into a permanent visible gap. Tycho recovered, and rather than hide the disfigurement, he commissioned a prosthetic to replace what he had lost, a custom-fitted nose bridge molded to fit his face, worn for the rest of his life. Popular legend later claimed it was pure gold and silver. He continued his secret astronomical studies in parallel with his official life, building his own instruments and cross-checking his measurements obsessively against every existing star chart he could find, certain that the standard tables in use across Europe were full of errors. On November 11th, 1572, everything changed. Tycho looked up and saw a brand new star in the constellation Cassiopeia, bright enough to rival Venus, visible even in daylight for weeks. According to the reigning Aristotelian cosmology, this was supposed to be impossible. The heavens beyond the moon were fixed and unchanging, incapable of producing anything new. Tycho measured the object's position night after night with his own precision instruments and proved mathematically that it showed no detectable parallax, meaning it was far beyond the moon, among the supposedly perfect and eternal stars, and it was new. He published his findings as De Nova Stella in 1573. Almost overnight, the disfigured young nobleman with the metal nose became one of the most talked-about scholars in Europe. Word of Tycho's discovery reached King Frederick II of Denmark, who made him an extraordinary offer in 1576, the entire island of Haven, plus generous state funding to build whatever research facility he wanted. Tycho built Uraniborg, the most advanced astronomical observatory in the world at the time, and spent the next 2 decades there recording the positions of stars and planets with a precision no one had achieved before the invention of the telescope. He wore his prosthetic nose through all of it, through royal visits, through his own increasingly public fame, through a life that included a pet elk that reportedly wandered his estate and, according to one widely repeated account, died after drinking too much beer at a banquet and falling down a staircase. In 2010, when researchers exhumed Tycho's remains from Prague's Church of Our Lady before Tin to settle old rumors that he had been poisoned, they took the opportunity to test the nasal area of his skull. The chemical residue was consistent with brass, a copper and zinc alloy, not the gold or silver of legend. His famous silver nose had likely been an everyday brass prosthetic, possibly with fancier gold or silver versions reserved for formal occasions. Tycho Brahe died in Prague in 1601, having spent 35 years of his adult life with a metal face that started as a source of shame and ended as barely a footnote beside his real legacy. In his final years, he hired a young mathematician named Johannes Kepler as his assistant, specifically to help make sense of his enormous archive of naked-eye observations, the most accurate ever recorded up to that point in history. After Tycho's death, Kepler inherited that data and spent years wrestling with it, refusing to accept small discrepancies that a less careful observer might have ignored. Those discrepancies were the key. Using Tycho's numbers, Kepler eventually proved that planets do not move in perfect circles at all, but in ellipses, one of the foundational laws of modern astronomy, and a discovery that would have been impossible without decades of measurements from a man who made them while wearing a fake nose. The duel over whose math was better cost Tycho part of his face. It never once slowed down the math itself.